reading the comedians. There are 3 comedians. They met on a cargo ship on its way to Haiti, Port-au-Prince. They have now arrived, and Mr. Smith is the presidential candidate. He and his wife have never been to Port-au-Prince before. Mr. Jones, who calls himself Major Jones, and the teller of this story, Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown has an affair with Martha Pineda, who is married, and she has a son called Angel. Her son is called Angel. Anyway, Mr. Brown arrives back at his hotel, which he has in Port-au-Prince, and he learns from Joseph that there have been no visitors, and he finds the dead body of Dr. Philippot in his pool. He has so far disguised it, and he's waiting for the doctor to arrive, and we are here. It is chapter 3, and it's Roman 2. I don't know why Greene makes it difficult. There's no titles to the chapters. Anyway, we are back in the hotel. I would lose the proper proportions of my subject if I were to recount every stage of my progress, from the casino in Monte Carlo to another casino in Port-au-Prince, where I found myself again in possession of money and in love with a woman, a coincidence no more unlikely than the encounter on the Atlantic between 3 people called Smith, Brown, and Jones. In the long interval, I had led a hand-to-mouth existence, except for a period of peace and respectability, which came with the war, and not all my occupations were of the kind to find a place in my curriculum vitae. The first job I obtained, thanks to my good knowledge of French, my Latin was singularly unhelpful, was at a small restaurant in Soho, where I served for 6 months as a waiter. I never mentioned that, nor my graduation to the Trocadero, thanks to a forged reference from Fouquet in Paris. After some years at the Trocadero, I rose to being advisor to a small firm of educational publishers who were launching a series of French classics with notes of a scrupulously cleansing nature. That did find a place in my curriculum. Others that followed did not. Indeed, I was a little spoiled by the security of my employment during the war, when I served in the political intelligence department of the Foreign Office, supervising the style of our propaganda to Vichy territory, and even had a lady novelist as my secretary. When the war was over, I wanted something better than my old life of hand-to-mouth, though nevertheless, for some years I returned to that way of life, until at last an idea came to me, south of Piccadilly, outside one of those galleries, where you are likely to see a less than pedigree work by an obscure 17th century Dutch painter, or perhaps it was outside a gallery a degree lower in the trade, where a taste for jovial cardinals enjoying their Friday summon was mysteriously catered for. A middle-aged man wearing a double-breasted waistcoat and a watch chain, a man remote, I would have said from artistic interest, stood gazing at the pictures. And suddenly I thought I knew exactly what was passing in his mind. At Sotheby's last month, a picture fetched £100,000. A picture can represent a fortune, if one knew enough or even took a chance. And he stared very hard at some cows in a meadow, as though he were watching a little ivory ball running around a groove. It was surely the cows in the meadow at which he gazed, and not the cardinals. No one could possibly envisage the cardinals in a Sotheby's sale. A week after that vision, south of Piccadilly, I gambled most of what I had accumulated during more than 30 years and invested in a trailer caravan and about 20 inexpensive prints. There was an Henry Rousseau at one end of the scale and a Jackson Pollock at the other. I hung these on one side of my van with a record of the sums which they had fetched at auction and the date of the sales. Then I procured a young art student able to turn me out rapidly a number of rough pastiches, which he signed each time with a different name. I would often sit with him while he worked and try out signatures on a piece of paper. In spite of the example of Pollock and Moore, which proved that even Anglo-Saxon name could have value, most of the names were foreign. I remember Mislot only because his work obstinately refused to sell, and in the end we had to paint out his signature and substitute it with well. I had come to realize that the purchaser wanted, as his minimum satisfaction, to be able to pronounce a name. I got a new vial the other day, and the nearest that even I could get to Muslos sounded like sludge, a name which may have caused unconscious purchaser resistance. I would drive from one provincial city to another, dragging my trailer, and come to rest in a well-to-do suburb of an industrial city. I soon realized that scientists and women were of little use to me. Scientists knew too much, and few housewives loved to gamble without the sight of ready cash that bingo provides. I needed gamblers, for the point of my exhibition was really this. Here, on one side of the gallery, you can see the pictures which have fetched the highest prices in the last 10 years. Would you have guessed that these cyclists by Léger, this station master by Rousseau, were worth a fortune? Here, on the other, you have a chance to spot their successors and win a fortune too. If you lose, at least you have something on your walls to talk about to your neighbors. You gain the reputation of being an advanced art patron. And it won't cost you more than... My price varied from 20 to 50 pounds, according to the neighborhood and the customer. I even once sold a two-headed woman in a long way after Picasso for 100. As my young man became more skillful at his job, he would turn me out an assorted half-dozen paintings in the morning, and I paid him £2.10 for each. I was robbing nobody. With £15 for a morning's work, he was well satisfied. I was even helping young Promise, and I'm sure that many a dinner party in the provinces went better because of some outrageous challenge to good taste upon the walls. I once sold an imitation Pollock to a man who had Walt Disney dwarfs planted in his garden, around the sundial and on either side the crazy paving. Did I harm him? He could afford the money. He had an air of complete invulnerability, though God knows for what aberration in his sexual or business life Dopey and the other dwarfs may have compensated. It was soon after my success with Dopey's owner that I received my mother's appeal, if you could call it an appeal. It came in the shape of a picture postcard, which showed the ruined citadel of the Emperor Christophe at Cap Haitian. She wrote on the back of it her name, which was new to me, her address, and 2 sentences. Feel a bit of a ruin myself. Nice to see you if you come this way. In brackets after Maman, not recognizing her hand, I read it first not unsuitable as Manon. She added Comtesse de Lascott-Villiers. It had taken many months to find me. I hadn't seen my mother since one occasion in Paris in 1934, and I had not heard from her during the war. I dare say I would not have answered her invitation, but for 2 things. It was the nearest she had ever approached to a maternal appeal, and it was really time for me to finish with the travelling art gallery. For a Sunday paper was trying to find out the source of my paintings. I had more than £1,000 in the bank. I sold the caravan, the stock, and the reproductions to a man who never read The People for £500, and I flew out to Kingston, where I looked around unsuccessfully for business opportunities before taking another plane to Port-au-Prince. So that was the end of Roman 2, and Roman 3 I'll read very soon.